Some Americans are using their IRA or 401k to fund Portugal's Golden Visa without taking an early distribution, without paying penalties, and without liquidating retirement savings they spent decades building. That part is real. But here's what almost nobody who covers this topic actually explains properly. Whether that structure holds up under US tax law is a genuinely open question. The IRS has not blessed it. There is no ruling, and if it goes wrong, the consequences aren't a fine or a footnote. They can be catastrophic. So in this video, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to explain exactly how the structure works mechanically, and I'm going to give you an honest account of the legal risk, because the risk is the whole story here. And it's the part most content on this topic either buries or skips entirely. If you want hype, this is not the right video. If you want to actually understand what you're getting into, stay with me. Before anything else, I want to separate two questions that almost always get conflated. Question 1, does Portugal allow Golden Visa investments funded from US retirement accounts? Yes. In Portugal's system, retirement money is clean, well documented, and raises no flags. Portuguese lawyers and banks process it without issue. IMA, Portugal's immigration authority, doesn't care where the money came from as long as it came from you and meets the investment requirements. Question 2, does US tax law allow you to use an IRA or 401k for this without triggering a taxable event? That is a completely separate question, and that's where the complexity lives, under a provision called IRC Section 4975. These are two different legal systems with two different answers. Conflating them is the most common mistake in how this topic gets covered. What a self-directed IRA is. Here's the mechanical foundation. A standard IRA at Fidelity, Vanguard, or Schwab limits you to whatever investment menu that custodian offers. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds. That's not an IRS restriction. That's a custodian restriction. The IRS actually permits IRAs to hold a much broader range of assets. Private equity, real estate, foreign investment funds. The vehicle that unlocks this is called Self-Directed IRA, or an SDIRA. Same account type, same tax treatment, same contribution limits. The difference is the custodian permits alternative assets, including assets outside the United States. To use an SDIRA for Portugal's Golden Visa, you roll your existing retirement account into one standard tax-free rollover and then direct the custodian to invest those funds into a qualifying Portuguese fund. The money moves from your old custodian to the SDIRA custodian, and from there to the fund. Because no distribution is triggered, no income tax is due, no early withdrawal penalty applies. The investment sits inside the retirement wrapper as an asset of the account. That's the structure. In isolation, the mechanics work. Problem isn't the mechanics, it's the legal question the structure raises once you pair it with a residency benefit. On the Portuguese side, the mechanics are straightforward. Portugal's Golden Visa requires a minimum €500,000 investment in a qualifying CMVM regulated fund. CMVM is Portugal's financial regulator, the equivalent of the SEC. These are private equity or venture capital funds specifically structured to meet the program's requirements. Once the investment is made, the fund issues a certificate. That goes into the Golden Visa application. IMA processes it, you attend a biometrics appointment in Portugal, and if approved, you receive a temporary residence card. That card gives you the right to live and work in Portugal, travel freely across the Schengen area, and after 5 years, apply for a permanent residence. On citizenship, under the current law, you can apply after 5 years, but this is about to change significantly, and I'll cover that in more detail shortly. The physical presence requirement is minimal. 7 days in Portugal in the first year, 14 days in each subsequent 2-year renewal period. You don't need to relocate. You don't need to become a Portuguese resident. You can keep living in the US while the clock runs. That's the immigration side, relatively clean. Now for the part that isn't. The prohibited transaction risk. IRC Section 4975 prohibits retirement accounts from engaging in transactions that provide a personal benefit to the account holder while the money is still inside the tax-advantaged wrapper. The classic example. You can't buy a house with your IRA and live in it. The account is making an investment, but you're personally benefiting from a tax-advantaged asset, effectively taking a distribution without paying the tax. Here's the issue with Golden Visa investing. The purpose of putting 500,000 euros into a Portuguese fund in the context of this program is to obtain residency rights. That is the personal benefit, EU residency, Schengen travel, a pathway to an EU passport. A competent US tax attorney can argue, and some do argue, that this benefit accrues to you personally, not to the retirement account, making it a prohibited transaction under Section 4975. If the IRS took that position and prevailed, the specific IRA used for the investment would be treated as distribution on January the 1st of the year the investment was made. The full balance of that account becomes immediately taxable income. Early withdrawal penalties apply if you're under 59 and a half. Now, one important clarification here that most coverage gets wrong. Under Secure Act 2.0, Section 322, enacted in 2023, only the specific IRA where the prohibited transaction occurred is disqualified. Your other IRAs are untouched. This is precisely why investors in this space isolate the Golden Visa investment in its own dedicated SDIRA. If the structure is ever challenged, the damage is contained to that one account, not your entire retirement savings. That's not a minor distinction. But even with the protection, the consequences on a single 500,000 euro plus account can be severe, and the IRS has issued no official guidance on this scenario. There is no private letter ruling that clears it. Promoters of this structure believe it's defensible. Some have built reasonable arguments, but defensible if challenged is meaningfully different than approved. One additional layer, most Portuguese Golden Visa funds are classified as passive foreign investment companies, PFICs. Under US tax law, for investments held inside an IRA PFIC, reporting is generally exempt. But if the IRA structure were ever disqualified, PFIC rules would apply to gains outside the account, and the tax treatment without proper elections is punitive. This is another reason you need a US tax attorney who specifically understands international retirement investments, not a generalist and not just a Portuguese immigration lawyer, who this is right for. Given all of that, this approach is appropriate for a narrow profile. You should have enough retirement accounts to make the 500,000 euro investment with meaningful buffer remaining. The dedicated SDIRA will carry ongoing costs, and the investment must be held for a minimum of 5 years. Your reason for using retirement funds should be genuinely strategic. The strongest case is an investor who has substantial retirement assets and needs to preserve liquid cash. Someone who would face a real financial problem if they liquidated retirement savings to fund this investment. You must work with a US tax attorney with specific experience in international retirement investments and IRC Section 4975. Someone who will give you written analysis of the prohibited transaction question for your specific situation, not a generalist, and not someone who will simply tell you what you want to hear. And you need to be comfortable with legal uncertainty. Not illegal, but not cleared either. That's the honest characterization of where this sits right now. Who should not do this? If you have 500,000 euros in non-retirement assets, taxable savings, investment accounts, proceeds from a property sale, use that. The SDIRA route exists to solve a specific problem. If you don't have that problem, don't manufacture complexity you don't need. If you're planning to actually live in Portugal, understand that Portuguese tax residency doesn't only trigger at 183 days. Under Portuguese tax law, there are 2 independent triggers. The first is spending more than 183 days in Portugal in a 12-month period. The second is maintaining what Portuguese law calls a habitual residence, a property that functions as your permanent home. Even if you spend far fewer than 183 days in the country, this catches Americans who rent long-term apartments in Lisbon or buy a property without intending to spend 183 days there. Once you become a Portuguese tax resident, the treatment of your US retirement account withdrawals under Portuguese law is a separate question that requires dedicated Portugal side tax advice. If your total retirement savings are under $600,000, the concentration risk alone is a problem. You'd be putting the majority of your retirement into a single illiquid foreign fund for a minimum of 5 years. That's not a retirement strategy. The citizenship update. Before the case study, you need to know about a significant change in progress. Under current Portuguese law, Golden Visa holders can apply for citizenship after 5 years of residency. That is likely to change, and soon. In October 2025, Portugal's parliament passed amendments to extend the citizenship eligibility from 5 to 10 years for most non-EU nationals. Portugal's Constitutional Court reviewed the law in December 2025 and critically did not strike down the 10-year extension itself. It struck down 4 completely unrelated provisions on procedural and constitutional grounds. The law returned to Parliament for revision of those provisions. The 10-year timeline was widely expected to pass once that revision is complete. What this means for you: if you're starting the Golden Visa process now, plan a 10-year path to citizenship, not 5. The 5-year rule is still technically in effect today, but the direction of travel is clear. Build your planning around 10 years and treat anything shorter as a potential upside. One of our clients, let's call him Andrew, was planning early retirement in 2 to 3 years. He had a real cash preservation problem. He needed his liquid savings to cover living expenses in the gap between retiring early and being able to access Social Security and retirement accounts at 59 and a half. He and his wife had enough in retirement accounts to fund the Golden Visa investment. They combined funds from 2 separate accounts to reach the €500,000 threshold, which is possible because the fund structure allows contributions from multiple sources. He set up a dedicated SDIRA specifically for this investment, isolating it from their other retirement assets. Rather than routing this through the Portuguese bank, the SDIRA custodian wired directly to the fund, cutting weeks off the process. From signing this advisory agreement to biometrics submitted was 8 months. He kept $540,000 in liquid cash untouched. His residency card is in process. That's the scenario where this approach has genuine logic. A real cash preservation problem, substantial retirement assets, a dedicated SDIRA isolating the investment, proper legal guidance in place, and a clear understanding of what they were doing and why. If you think you're in that narrow group, here's the sequence. First, get a US tax attorney to give you written analysis of the prohibited transaction question for your specific structure. Before you move a dollar, if that review comes back defensible and you understand what you're accepting, then you're ready to look at the Portugal side. Second, come talk to us at Moving2. We work with American investors on Portugal's Golden Visa every day. We can walk you through the fund landscape, the application process, the compliance picture, and connect you with the right professionals on both sides of the Atlantic. There's a link below to book a consultation. This video is a starting point, not advice. The decisions here on both the US tax side and the Portuguese immigration side require qualified professionals with specific experience. This is one of the most interesting and least understood corners of the Golden Visa space. Done right by the right investor with the right advice, it's a legitimate strategy. Done casually, it's a serious mistake. The difference is entirely in what you do before you sign anything. A quick disclaimer. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal, tax, investment, or immigration advice. IRS has not issued guidance specifically addressing the use of retirement funds for Golden Visa investments. Viewers should consult a qualified US tax attorney and licensed immigration counsel before making any decisions. Information is current as of March 2026 and subject to change.